From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It was a busy day here in the Alabama Legislature, where the House and the Senate met for the 16th legislative day. That means there are 14 legislative days remaining this session. We'll start in the House, where another tax cut bill was before the body. This one, however, was sponsored by a Democrat. House Bill 217 from House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels would eliminate the state income tax for overtime hours worked. Daniels said the legislation will help workers by putting more money in their pockets and help businesses be able to find more workers and produce more.
Members, this is the a very important piece of legislation that has broad support in this chamber, but it's a bill that really addresses the working class people in the state of Alabama. And so what this bill does is a person that works 40 hours, an hourly worker that works 40 hours, any hour after the 40-hour mark, the state of Alabama taxes at 5%. So you're taxing 5%, time and a half at 5%. What this legislation, what this will do is allow that 5% to go back to the employee just for overtime only.
And I just want to say that you not only thought outside the box, you created a box that I think Alabama has never experienced before. And I am so anxious to see how this is going to work for Alabama, because I think it's going to be good for the employee, it's going to be good for business, and overall it's going to be good for our economy, not just locally, but Alabama as a whole. So hopefully we can stop the bleeding from people going elsewhere.
That bill passed unanimously and now goes to the Senate. Also in the House, there was legislation dealing with high school athletic events. House Bill 364 from State Representative Steve Hurst would require schools to accept cash for admission to sporting events. Hurst and his colleagues say that high schools around the state are starting to go credit card only, and that it's only fair to allow cash to be used. State Representative Chris Blackshear offered an amendment to ensure that cash would also be accepted at statewide events, such as the high school championships.
A lady came up, a grandmother, she was better than 70, between 70 and 80 years old, with 3 grandkids. She said, we came to the ball game and they said, we don't take cash, we gotta have a credit card. She said, I don't have a credit card. I said, all I have is cash. Well, you can't get in. She said, look, my grandkids called me to spend a weekend with me, for me to bring them to the ball game. I drove almost 30 miles over here, and you're not gonna let my grandchildren in this game? They said no, they can't get in. So this is infuriating to me, and then I began to check and find out, and it's spread all over the state of Alabama. What I can't understand is what's wrong with cash today. You know, everybody wants cash. What's wrong with cash? So what I'm saying in this is we need to do something to rectify this act. And what I'm saying is that, I'll read the synopsis of it. So this bill would require a public K through 12 school or local board of education to accept cash or any other form of payment of its choosing for admission to school-sponsored sporting events that are open to the public. That means they can take credit cards, they can take cash, etc., but they've got to take cash.
That bill also passed unanimously and now goes to the Senate. Upstairs in the Senate, senators took up the issue of street racing or exhibition driving. House Bill 29 is sponsored by State Representative Alan Treadaway and is being carried in the Senate by State Senator Roger Smitherman. It would give local law enforcement better tools to crack down on street racing, a problem that Smitherman described as deadly.
Folks running around there doing donuts in the middle of the street, speeding, racing. We had 4 people to get killed in Birmingham who were just standing on the sidelines when one of these automobiles went out of control. And we've had just as late as last night, yesterday, they're out at the airport where they really disrupted the whole thing and placed people in danger. What this bill does, it goes from them having to excite them on reckless driving and things of that nature to being able to put some teeth in the bill where they can actually apprehend the car, they can apprehend this person, and if they injured someone, then it can become a sad Class C felony.
That bill passed unanimously and now goes to the governor. The Senate also passed legislation dealing with financial literacy. House Bill 164 would require public school students to complete a course on basic money management before graduating. State Senator Jay Hovey, who was carrying the bill for State Representative Andy Witt, said kids are leaving school for the real world without the basic tools they need to make sound financial decisions.
You know, in your hours, you don't have to have so many hours to graduate. And does this count as one of those hours, or does it not? Do you know?
Yeah, I do know. The intent here is not to add any additional courses. This is actually to implement curriculum into existing classes.
Okay.
So there is no additional testing for graduation, but this is just to outline requirements to be added to existing classes.
And that's final passage for the financial literacy bill, as it now too goes to the governor. There was also action in committee today. The Senate County and Municipal Government Committee met and took up and passed legislation cracking down on loitering on public roads and bridges. House Bill 24 doesn't specifically mention the word panhandling, but it does prohibit people from asking for money on the side of the road. The bill is sponsored, or supported rather, by the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, the Alabama Department of Transportation, and several local governments. State Representative Reed Ingram says it's also a public safety measure.
The 22 stats are not in yet from DOT, but in 21 we had over 800 get run over and killed on the side of the road. And there's a lot of people that are standing on the side of the road with either mental health or drug abuse that are out there begging for money. And there's been several in my city here in Montgomery that have gotten run over. And so it's a liability for them to be out on the road, and it's a liability for the driver to be out there because they're held responsible if they hit one of them. And so, you know, on state highways, the speed limit's generally a little higher than a county road or either a city road. And so we're just taking it to where no loitering on a state right-of-way. You can still walk if you're walking or jogging, not a problem. You can still do whatever your local government allows you to do, but loitering and standing out in the road and begging is just not acceptable. In a lot of places and throughout the state, people were sleeping under underpasses and having burn barrels in the wintertime, and it would be dangerous if it was a car accident or a truck turnover.
Outside the State House today, a high-ranking Navy officer made a visit back to his home state to discuss Alabama's role in military and trade matters. Rear Admiral Mike Brown addressed the Montgomery Chamber of Commerce, saying the state stands to benefit from improved investments in the Port of Alabama and related infrastructure.
Alabama is an exporting powerhouse. I don't know if you knew that about Alabama, but it is. $1 out of every $9 of this state's economy depends on trade. It specifically depends on exports, right? Exports of farm products, like obviously cotton and peanuts. Exports of food, like poultry and catfish, and timber and paper. But the bulk of the exports now come in very high added value fields, right? Autos, Hyundai, and auto parts, aviation and aviation materials, and high-end chemicals for industrial processes. Those go to Canada, to Mexico, to Germany, to China, to Japan, and to South Korea. So from that, Mobile is booming. Mobile is now the 11th largest port in the United States. But Alabama can't recognize that revenue if its exports can't get to where they're going, and they get to where they're going because the Navy provides the freedom of the seas that allows that goodness to happen.
And before we go to break, Joe Borg announced his retirement today from the Alabama Securities and Exchange Commission. Borg has led the agency for 28 years, overseeing the return of nearly $275 million to the general fund and more than $265 million in restitution ordered to victims. He's also been a frequent guest here on Capitol Journal, and we wish him congratulations and best wishes for retirement. We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next is State Representative Steve Clouse from Ozark. Mr. Clouse, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
Well, you have a bill on the floor today dealing with local fuel taxes. This is if a city or a county wants to go and pass a local fuel tax, gasoline, diesel, then it has to go towards roads and bridges. Is that the way did I characterize that correctly?
That's correct. This bill has been around for several years. I hadn't sponsored it until this year. And I think a lot of concern from gasoline retailers is that over the years now, more and more cities and some counties, but very few counties, have been passing some gasoline taxes, not necessarily dedicated to roads and bridges and for other things involved in their local government. So I wanted to take this on because 4 years ago when we passed the Rebuild Alabama, the 10-cent a gallon tax for roads and bridges, it was an issue in the legislature that we had a certain amount of funds that were coming out of DOT going to support other areas of the state government. Particularly the $35 million were going to the courts to supposedly take care of traffic-related issues, which is sort of a stretch, and then $28.5 million going to ALEA, which wasn't quite as a stretch, but anyway, it was not going necessarily straight to roads and bridges. So what we did 4 years ago, and we had the funds at that time to do a partial amount, we started paying that $35 million out of the general fund instead of DOT sending that to the court system, and had been working on trying to get the other $28.5 out of the general fund instead of going from DOT to ALEA. Last year, when I was chairman of the general fund budget, we started taking $5 million out of the general fund and still had $23.5 million left, and hopefully take $5 million a year. Well, things have turned around so good this year with the budgets that Governor Ivey and her budget went ahead and took that $23.5 million out of the general fund instead of taking it from DOT. And in the recent general fund budget that Chairman Reynolds presented to the House, he left that intact there. So now there's no more DOT money on the state level coming out of DOT going to other state agencies. It's all coming out of the general fund. So I thought we need to move on forward with this also at the local level, and let's just make sure we make it crystal clear that those local funds as well as state funds need to go to roads and bridges.
Well, people do, I think, have an expectation that fuel taxes fund roads and bridges. You described it as a user fee, and that's sort of people who are comfortable with that. But, some city or county could, pass a penny, gasoline tax and use it for schools or whatever in the past. But this bill would say, no, only for roads and bridges.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, look, while I've got you, I have to ask just in general what your thoughts on the session so far are. We're here at the halfway point.
Right.
Probably the heavy lifts are here to come with the budgets, all that kind of stuff. What should we be looking forward to here in the second half of the session?
Well, the first half has moved very smoothly, I think. We had a lot of pent-up demand on some issues there, dealing with, of course, the fentanyl bill, the adoption bill that we've been working on for several years now, finally came to fruition. The economic development bills that we knew had to be renewed for the next 5 years, so that's out of the way now for the next 5 years. So of course the budgets, we got the general fund passed in the House. It's now in the Senate, and I assume that the Senate will take up the education budget this week. You know, it's my 29th year. We've never been in this situation, particularly in the education budget, with this amount of surplus. I don't know that we'll ever be in this situation again in my lifetime. So it's a unique opportunity, but of course it's also will cause a lot of issues amongst a lot of different legislators and a lot of different interest groups around the state. So I think we'll have a lot of discussion here dealing with the education budget in the next few weeks.
Yeah, when there's that much money, when there's that much surplus, it's almost harder to deal with, right?
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Also wanted to ask you about up in the Senate today, they have a bill dealing with, well, part of it deals with the State House and maybe starting a process by which we can finally say, okay, the legislature needs a new home. I think it's something anybody in this building kind of agrees with. But maybe the folks out there don't really understand why the need for it, because they don't walk these halls all the time.
That's right.
Like you said, you've been here a long time. Talk about that need and maybe explaining why it's necessary.
Well, there's no question. Like I said, this is my 29th year, and I've seen this building go down, down, down. I was here in 2009 when we had the flood, and my vehicle was one of the 20 that was totaled on the bottom floor of the parking deck.
Really?
So
right out here.
By the time I got to my car, it was already up to the steering wheel. Anyway, it's just this building was not built to be a state house. It was built as a Department of Transportation building back in 1962. And the legislature took it over in '85 after DOT moved to their new facilities to temporarily stay here while construction was going on across the street at the Capitol, and then was going to move back. Well, of course, that never happened.
Right.
This building has served its purpose here. I think the main thing that we got to remember, because I know it's controversial to build a new state house, is it's for the people. It's for future generations. It certainly won't be for me, but it's not right for people to come from all over the state here to testify before committees, to see their legislators, and not be able to adequately get up and down. The hallways are narrow. The elevators are antiquated. People who are disabled in wheelchairs, it's hard for them to maneuver around these narrow halls. Sure, it's not right for them, and you know, we need a building that's going to last for the next 200 years, for generations and generations to come, to be able to conduct the business of the state.
Yeah, and you look around at other states and where they are meeting, whether it's the Capitol or an adjacent state house, and we are far, far behind. Has to be the worst in the country.
I would think so.
We're out of time, Mr. Clouse, but thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Joining me next is State Representative Ontario Tillman from Bessemer. Mr. Tillman, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Well, you are a brand new member of the House of Representatives. Maybe I shouldn't say brand new, because now we're halfway through
the session.
You don't get to be a freshman anymore, halfway through.
Somewhat. They still calling me freshman and treating me as a freshman. So.
Well, a little bit of hazing, that happens. But I wanted the audience to get a feel for you as a new member, and first ask you why you decided to run for House in the first place.
Well, my name is Ontario Tillman. Before I was elected as the House member from District 56, I was a school teacher, high school teacher, as well as a practicing attorney. And the reason why I decided to run for state office, it stems all the way back to my grandmother. My mom, they were true activists, and I grew up in that light. I used to work the polls, I used to pass out different campaign material, and ironically enough, I actually campaigned for Mr. Lawrence McAdory, who is the seat that I'm currently sitting in.
How about that?
I know, it's sort of like it's a full circle thing for me.
So it's in your blood.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, how's it been going so far? I noticed that you picked up some pretty big committees. Judiciary.
Yes.
I mean, as a freshman, that's huge. Financial services, which has to do with all the banking.
Yes.
So has it been so far getting acquainted here in the House and just kind of getting your sea legs?
Well, it's a lot. You know, actually, as they say, it's almost like drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot of information. It's coming quickly, coming fast. But my caucus has been doing a great job in teaching us different things, showing us different things. Also reading the material, understanding the legislation that's being, placed before you, and really doing the job for the people. Making sure that you are representing them, making sure that you are familiar and well versed with the bills that come forward. And I do, kind of sum that up to my legal background, actually understanding a lot of the statutes, understanding the different laws. So they helped me out, tremendously.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, being both an attorney and a school teacher gives you interesting perspective. And I should mention basketball coach too.
Yeah,
You mentioned
absolutely.
basketball
Yeah,
coach.
yeah.
How about
He was
that?
a coach. Yeah, coach as well.
There's a few coaches
I know.
around these halls. But that's interesting because, like you said, it that legal background does help you read through the legislation, understand the terms of art and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff. But also school teachers. So much of what happens here in the State House impacts school teachers,
Yes.
and we talk about education so much. So
Yes.
those two backgrounds
Helps.
probably
yes.
probably gives you a leg up.
Yes, it does, because I was a public school teacher. I always support public schools, and that's part of our initiatives and platform here. And we also we want to make sure that we're doing what is best for our kids, and making sure we're doing everything to make sure we have and allow our kids to have the equipment and the information so they can create and become productive citizens. So it's huge being a teacher. I was a special education teacher. So my background was a little bit more specialized, dealing with IEPs, dealing with learning behavior disorders and different things of that nature. And also actually being a head basketball coach. It kind of taught me the sense of community, dealing with the players, dealing with the parents. All was a great job, great experience, which prepared me to be here.
Yeah. I like to talk with Mr. Smitherman, who coaches.
Yes.
I guess he coaches the girls now.
Yes, with Ramsey.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
yes.
man, it's
Yeah.
he gets real competitive now.
Yes, the senator, he loves sports, he loves basketball, so it's always good to talk basketball with him.
That's right. Well, now that we're halfway through session, I know a lot of times new members you first want to observe.
Yes.
And not jump right in thinking, okay, I'm just going to follow this legislation. So sometimes folks sort of take their time, get their feet wet. What legislation are you kind of involved in or looking at? Are there any things in particular that you're wanting to even introduce or maybe co-sponsor this time around?
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think the best way to do is to come in and kind of learn the process, because it's a unique process and it's a very difficult process. And if you're not familiar with it, you cannot come in and be able to do the different things that you do. But because I have great mentors, and like I said, my party, my caucus, they help a lot with a lot of different things that we want. So I do have bills and legislation that are in the works right now. I'm not going to tip too much about what they are,
Okay.
but I believe that they will be pretty good. I think that it's legislation that will help all of the people in the state of Alabama. And I think that once they are finished being drafted and I start doing the due diligence of actually trying to get them passed, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on those.
It's interesting, and that you're digging into the legislation, working with LSA and the staff to get all that stuff done.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I juxtapose what happens here in the State House and in Montgomery to Washington.
Yes.
And up in Washington, at least the last little while, last several years, it's become a lot less legislating and a lot more press releases. Like all their staff has just become comm staff. It's just tweeting and floor speech and all that. Very little legislation. Sounds like you want to go the legislation route,
Yes.
the work route.
Yes, because the people of District 56, they elected me for a reason, and the reason is to serve them. I look at this as an honor, as a privilege to actually serve. So I want to do my job. This is the reason why they sent me here. They sent me here to represent them, to represent my district, and also to represent the people in the state of Alabama. So I want to, draft and put forth legislation that's going to make Alabama an attractive state, make Alabama a better state, and make the people in the state of Alabama better and have a better quality of life.
Well said, and we'll leave it there. Mr.
Absolutely.
Tillman, thanks again for coming on the show.
Anytime. Actually, I had a great time. I'm surprised. I'm happy to be here. I watch it all the time. To be standing here now, like, wow, it's real.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're glad to turn viewers into guests.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. We'll be right back.
Birmingham, Alabama native Fannie Flagg, who is best known for her novel Fried Green Tomatoes, had a long career as an actress and comedian before dedicating herself to writing. Published in 1987, Fried Green Tomatoes, a story of racial and gender inequalities told through the unlikely but strong bonds of its female characters, resonated with audiences. The novel stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 36 weeks and was adapted into a critically acclaimed movie.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 10:30 with more coverage of the Alabama Legislature right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.